They stared straight at you, made the choice to wound you, and then strolled off like the moment cost them nothing. No flinch, no breakdown. And later, in the stillness, one thought started stealing your sleep more often than you'd ever confess out loud. Why do they look untouched while you're the one left in pieces? You searched their face for fractures. You expected their shiny new chapter to crumble, expected remorse to hunt them down, expected that eventual message where reality finally landed. It never arrived. And somehow that emptiness convinced you that the flaw must be yours. But here's a truth almost nobody hands you about betrayal. The fallout hardly ever roars, it seldom keeps a calendar, and it practically never appears the way your heart begs it to. What genuinely unfolds inside a person who breaks a trust is much softer, much more gradual, and far more telling than any explosive collapse you keep picturing. If you're piecing yourself back together and you crave grounded, psychology-informed talks that help you decode the wreckage without dissolving into resentment, pause and hit subscribe. This corner belongs to people choosing to mend with clear eyes, not spite. Let me open with a hard thing to absorb. More often than not, the one who betrayed you never believed they were destroying a single thing. That's exactly what makes it so dizzying. They weren't seated across from you plotting your ruin. Usually they were reaching for something, escape, notice, the thrill of being desired, a taste of authority, anything that made them feel more awake, more mighty, more visible. And in that instant, your suffering simply failed to appear on their radar. Not because you were meaningless, but because they'd already spun a tale that let the choice sit comfortably inside them. Here, psychology hands us something valuable. The mind is astonishingly good at guarding its own reflection. When a person acts against the way they long to view themselves, a strange inner friction shows up. Few can bear that friction for long. So, rather than fixing the action, they revise the narrative. They convince themselves you were cold. They convince themselves misery drove them. They convince themselves any human alive would have cracked the same way. They redraft the entire chronicle of your bond until the betrayal reads as a response, never a decision. And each retelling makes their addition feel more solid. In moments clashed so sharply with what you remember, you weren't inventing it. You were witnessing someone rewrite the truth so they could keep breathing beside themselves. You weren't imagining the lie. You were watching someone survive it. Then comes the issue of entitlement. Not every betrayer is a narcissist. That deserves to be stated plainly. Self-interest lives along a wide range. And troubling conduct doesn't instantly signal a clinical disorder. Yet certain shapes surface over and over. One is the silent conviction that they had something coming, owed a rush, owed applause, owed permission to grab whatever they craved without counting the toll on the person who trusted them. When someone runs on that brand of entitlement, your ache turns into a nuisance instead of a result. They might even bristle that you're hurting, because your hurt spoils the fantasy where they're the deserving hero. And then arrives validation. For plenty of people, betrayal isn't truly about the other individual at all. It's about that sensation of being picked, craved, or made to matter. Outside attention can spark a fierce high. It can leave someone feeling momentarily complete. But that high is fragile by nature, because it hangs entirely on something beyond their own skin. And when a person props their worth on other people's reactions, they're never actually filled. They're only briefly diverted from the hollowness beneath. This is one of the earliest honest outcomes of betrayal, though it rarely wears the face of punishment. Someone grasping for validation instead of closeness usually lands in a loop. The buzz dims, the emptiness creeps back, and off they go searching again, not because fate struck them down, but because they never mastered simply being alone with themselves. Now let's turn to accountability, since this is where the richest insight waits. When the results of their actions start surfacing, plenty of betrayers don't answer with real soul-searching. They answer with defensiveness. They might shrink what they did. They might swear you're blowing it out of proportion. They might use your response as proof you were fragile from the start. This behavior is called blame shifting, and it shields them from the crushing weight of an honest look in the mirror. You have to grasp something vital here. Aching over consequences is not the same as feeling remorse. A person can be shattered that they lost their good name, their ease, their access to you, and still hold zero true ownership of the damage itself. Regret whispers, "I wish this hadn't landed on me." Remorse says, "I see what I did to you." Regret mourns the cost to them. Remorse names the cost to you. Those are different worlds, and blurring them can cage you for years. That's why apologies mislead so easily. An apology with no shift in behavior behind it isn't evidence of change. It's frequently just a bid to ease their own unrest or reclaim what slipped away. Genuine accountability doesn't insist on your forgiveness. It doesn't ask you to prop the door open again. It shows up without a single excuse trailing it. It merely names the harm without cushioning it. If you've been holding out for that variety of accountability, let me softly ready you for the chance it may never surface. Not because you weren't worthy of it, but because offering it would demand a depth of self-honesty some people flatly refuse to meet. And now I want to swing the lens toward you, because you are the whole reason this talk exists. Betrayal breeds a very specific brand of confusion. You rerun old conversations. You dig for the exact moment it shifted. You question what you overlooked, what you fell short of, what the stranger possessed that you somehow lacked. You might catch yourself weighing your value against a person you've never once met. And below all of it, usually throbs a single wish. You want them, at last, to grasp what they did to you. Let me recast that for you. The fact that your thoughts keep looping back doesn't automatically mean you still crave their return. Very often, the mind orbits an unresolved wrong because it's straining to make sense of something that cracked its notion of safety. Your spinning thoughts aren't a flaw. They're your psyche struggling to rebuild a map of a world that betrayal tore apart. But a trap hides inside this whole process, and it's among the most crucial things I can offer you. The hunger for closure can quietly morph into one more type of attachment. As long as you're waiting for them to see, to ache, to admit, to suffer, you stay emotionally roped to them. You've handed them the authority to decide the hour you're finally permitted peace. If this talk is touching something true in you, stay close and think about subscribing so you can keep circling back to this kind of honest reflection. Healing isn't one flash of clarity. It's a practice you keep returning to, and you deserve a place that holds it. Now let me meet the question you've likely asked above every other. When will they see what they threw away? When will it finally catch them? Here's the straight answer. Sometimes it truly does. Across time, habits of betrayal tend to wear down the very pieces that keep a life feeling steady. Trust, snapped again and again, grows nearly impossible to knit with anyone. People who routinely trample boundaries may discover that emotionally sound partners eventually spot the pattern and walk. Bonds founded on deceit usually drag that same wobble along with them. Standing inside close circles can quietly slide as more eyes catch the truth. And a person leaning on outside validation may drift into deeper isolation over the years because they never grew the inner footing real closeness asks for. None of these are promises. I won't pledge you karma, because that would be a lie, and you've swallowed enough lies already. Some people seem to breeze onward fast. Some never openly own what they did. Some keep blaming everyone else for a lifetime, and look, from the outside, entirely fine. What I can promise is this: the same patterns that let them betray you rarely stay boxed up with you alone. Conduct repeats, and people who can't be truthful with others usually can't be truthful with themselves either. That interior dishonesty carries a price, even when it's hidden from every watching eye. But here's the turn that shifts everything, and I need you to really sit inside it. Your liberation can't hinge on their awakening. Your healing can't idle until their regret shows. Your peace can't sit hostage to whether their fresh life unravels, because if it does, they still run you. They still grip the clock of your recovery, and that's a kind of continuing power you're not obligated to surrender. The deepest consequence isn't that they hurt. It's that they no longer reach the version of you they once assumed was guaranteed, not as a game, not as a blade meant to needle them, but as the real fruit of you becoming someone who guards your own life. Here's where boundaries walk in, and I want to be exact about them. A boundary isn't a penalty. It isn't a scheme to make someone come running. If you're trimming or cutting contact, see it for what it honestly is. Pulling back can break the repeating emotional triggers that keep splitting the wound open. It can build the quiet you need to think straight when the contact itself has turned you unsteady. That's a whole different thing from silence weaponized to squeeze out a reaction. One protects you. The other keeps you tangled. Pick the one that hands you freedom. And please don't let anyone sell you the idea that going quiet is a ploy to lure someone back. If you fall silent, hoping they'll notice, you're still camped inside their world. The point of distance isn't to reshape them. It's to give you space to grow back into yourself. So let's talk about who that self might become. Rebuilding after betrayal starts with self-trust, and this is often the steepest climb, because betrayal makes you distrust your own read on things. You begin wondering how the signs slipped past you, whether your gut can be trusted, whether you'll just get fooled all over again. Self-trust returns in slow motion, through small, honest choices, through learning to spot the patterns you finally understand, through tuning back into the faint signals you once talked yourself out of hearing. It also means reconnecting with your values. Betrayal tends to yank your whole identity toward the one who wounded you. Your thoughts, your energy, your very sense of self begins circling them. Recovery is the work of dragging that gravity back to your own core, toward what you love, toward people who never made you doubt your worth, toward a life not built around one injury. And here self-respect becomes essential. Let me tell you what self-respect is not. It isn't turning to stone. It isn't turning cruel. It isn't swearing off trust for the rest of your days. That's not strength. That's a wound dressed in armor. Real self-respect is discovering that kindness doesn't owe anyone unlimited entry to you. It's discovering that forgiving someone doesn't handcuff you to reunion. It's discovering that understanding why they acted doesn't force you to pardon it. And above everything, it's discovering that loving another human should never cost you yourself. You can hold empathy and still bolt the door. You can grasp someone's wounds and still shield yourself from their behavior. Those aren't contradictions, they're maturity. As you rebuild, you'll probably notice something unexpected. The endless replaying starts to hush. The itch to check on their life starts to dissolve, not because you strong-armed it, but because your mind gradually locates the meaning it was hunting. And once you understand what happened, you stop needing them to confirm it. That's the moment your recovery turns fully yours, when your inner weather no longer swings with every update about them, when their choices become plain information rather than a ruling on your value, when you realize the real question was never whether they'd regret losing you. The question was whether you'd finally quit losing yourself. So release the worn-out questions. When will they see? When will they be sorry? When will they get how deeply they cut me? Those kept you staring backward, waiting on a door that might stay shut forever. There's a stronger question, and it's yours alone. What comes next in my life? Betrayal may have rewritten your story. It may have stolen time, trust, and a future you once counted on, but it doesn't get to author the remaining pages unless you surrender the pen, and you don't have to. The people who harmed you were grabbing for something they hoped would make them whole. You don't have to grab outward the way they did. You can raise something sturdier from within. A life carved by your values, fenced by your boundaries, and defined by your dignity instead of their absence. You weren't destroyed by their actions. You were shown to yourself. You learned where your lines needed drawing. You learned what you'll no longer put up with. You learned your peace isn't a debt you owe anyone who handles it carelessly. That knowledge isn't a scar, it's bedrock. If this reached somewhere honest in you and you want to keep rebuilding with clarity instead of bitterness, do me a quick favor and tap like, then subscribe and stay here with Psych Seeker. This is where we keep doing the true labor of healing, boundaries, self-worth, and recovery. One honest step at a time. You don't have to wait on anyone to grasp what they let slip. You only have to decide what you're ready to build. And that decision already belongs to you.